You want to know what happens when 120 families wake up one morning and realize their dream homes, those picture-perfect houses they scrimped and saved for with the granite countertops and the shiny wood floors, were built on land that wasn't even for sale? Yeah, you heard that right. In Texas, of all places, an HOA president's ego turned a patch of dirt into a powder keg, and the quietest man in town set the whole thing off without ever raising his voice. Now, if you know anything about Janice Mand, you'll know she wasn't the type to play small. She craved legacy, something big, something that'd have folks in Briar Glen talking about her for years, probably while rolling their eyes at the mention of her name. So when she got the chance to push through a fancy new development, 120 slick townhouses, each with the kind of bells and whistles you see on those home makeover shows, she leaped at it. The way Janice spun it, this was the community's forgotten acreage, a dusty expanse just outside Dallas that she could spin into gold and maybe parlay into a run at regional politics later. Her name, big letters on the sign right under the gables at Briar Glen. Here's where it gets good. That community land she kept bragging about wasn't community land at all. And her mistake, well, it was about to become the biggest legal mess the town had ever seen. If you ever went to an HOA meeting in Briar Glen, you'd know Janice ran them like a cross between Judge Judy and a small-town dictator. She had her stack of bylaws ready to go, spitting out regulations and clapping back at anyone who got out of line. "We're not just managing lawns and fences here," she barked. "Once we're protecting lifestyles and legacies." I mean, she really believed it. Developers from Fort Worth had been knocking at her door for months, waving glossy brochures and whispering about profits and connections. Janice finally caved after a few steak dinners and closed-door chats, signed the papers with all the confidence in the world, even though the HOA board was split, and most folks weren't so sure. But Janice's voice was the only one that counted, at least as far as she was concerned. Next thing you know, bulldozers are out there turning up, that Texas soil dust rising, neighbors gawking as rows of houses pop up overnight. Affordable luxury starting in the low 300s, the signs all said, plastered up and down Highway 287. Janice strutted through the construction site like she owned the place, designer shades, heels kicking up dirt, shaking hands with contractors, posing for the newsletter. She told buyers, "This is what progress looks like." And folks believed her. Why wouldn't they? But not everyone bought into the fantasy. Standing at the edge of the chaos was a man named Calvin Redden. Faded jeans, old work boots, button-up shirt that had seen better days. Calvin wasn't shouting. He wasn't waving protest signs or calling the news. He was just watching quiet as a shadow, hands in his pockets, like he'd seen this kind of storm before. And he had. That land, every single inch of it, had been in his family since 1953, back when his grandfather, a black veteran fresh out of the Korean War, scraped together every penny he had to buy it. The kind of land people tried to take one way or another, but the Redden family never let go. Calvin kept every document locked up safe as can be. So when he saw those bulldozers, he didn't panic, he just started documenting. Dates, photos, permits, all the things Janice never bothered to double-check. And every nail those contractors hammered, every dollar those developers poured in, it just made Calvin's case stronger. He was patient, methodical, a man who knew that when you're right, sometimes the best thing you can do is let your enemy dig their own grave. While Janice was out doing ribbon cuttings and taking pictures for the paper Briar Glen building for tomorrow, Calvin was at home with his wife Denise, calmly building a file that could bury the whole project. Denise would ask Cal, what if they sell all those homes before anyone figures this out? And Calvin would just say, let 'em. Every buyer is just another witness on my side. The houses went up fast. Families lined up, young couples dreaming of barbecues in the backyard. Retirees picturing grandkids visiting single moms like Dana Ortiz, finally finding a place to call their own. For a while, it felt like hope. But you ever notice how perfect dreams usually sit on cracked foundations? At an HOA meeting, a guy named Greg Simmons stood up and asked the question nobody wanted to hear Janice, who owns that land county record, say it's private. Janice tried to wave him off, but the seed of doubt was planted. Meanwhile, Calvin kept his head down. He'd sit in his truck at the edge of the site, snapping photos, jotting down notes. He wasn't looking for revenge, he was fighting for respect for the family name his grandfather had bled to keep. Even his cousin Jerome, who was hot-headed and always ready for a fight, tried to push him. "You just gonna let him keep building?" Jerome asked. Calvin just smiled. "Every dollar they spend just makes my case stronger. Let him keep digging." As the homes filled up, the pressure mounted. The first real crack came when Greg Simmons, stubborn as a mule, went down to the courthouse and found the deed right there, plain as day, Calvin Redden's name on the paper. At the next HOA meeting, Greg dropped the bombshell in front of a packed house. "Janice, the county says you never owned that land. It's Calvin's." You could feel the panic ripple through the room. Janice doubled down, called it a clerical error, but the air was different now. Doubt was everywhere. Behind closed doors, Janice and her vice president Harold Flynn started to sweat. Investors wanted answers. Developers threatened lawsuits. Harold whispered, "What if this Redden guy really does own the land?" Janice snapped, "Don't you dare say that." But even she felt the ground slipping. Calvin, meanwhile, was ready to move. His lawyer, Monica, a no-nonsense woman who'd seen every land grab in the book, spread out his stack of documents and just shook her head. "You've got him dead to rights, Calvin. Wait a little longer, let him sink in deeper. The damages will be massive." And Calvin, who cared more about his family's name than any payout, agreed. He'd let the pot simmer. The letter landed on Janice's desk like a sledgehammer. Formal notice of claim. All the documentation, court filings, survey maps, right down to Monica's signature. The HOA and the developers had 30 days to respond or face the lawsuit of the century. Janice lost it, called an emergency meeting, waving the letter around, claiming extortion. But when her own vice president read through the paperwork, his face went white. "Janice, this is real. We built everything on the wrong man's land." A developer put it plain. "If this is true, we're sitting on a $40 million disaster." The news hit the wires and Briar Glen exploded. Residents screamed at HOA meetings. "You sold us worthless property," while Janice slammed her gavel trying to keep order. Calvin just watched from a distance, sipping his tea while the community tore itself apart. He'd always known this day would come. Denise asked. "Don't you feel bad for them?" Calvin said. "They trusted the wrong people. This is the price for that." As the case rolled into court, the whole country started watching. In the packed courtroom, Calvin's lawyer laid out the chain of ownership, original deed from 1953, taxes paid, not a single transfer in 70 years. Janice's lawyers argued good faith begged the judge not to uproot hundreds of families. But the judge wasn't buying it. Good faith didn't erase the law. On the stand, Janice was a shadow of her old self, admitting she never checked the deed herself, that she trusted the experts. Monica wasn't letting her off easy. Or you ignored the truth when it threatened your ambition. And that right there was the whole story in one sentence. The judge ruled for Calvin. The land was his. Every house on it was built illegally, and the HOA had no authority to sell or develop a thing. The fallout. Families devastated, some forced out, others left in limbo. Janice was sued by everyone, Calvin, the developers, the very people she once promised to protect. Her reputation, her finances, her so-called legacy, all in ruins. She was a ghost in town, hiding behind sunglasses, mailbox stuffed with lawsuits, old friends crossing the street to avoid her. Calvin never gloated. He got his damages, got his name restored, but stayed in the same old house, keeping to himself. He told reporters, "This was never about money. It was about respect for the law, for my family, for what's right. And if there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. You can't shortcut your way to legacy. You can't fake ownership. You can't build your future on someone else's foundation and expect it to hold. Ambition without respect for the basics like truth and ownership ruins lives, not just your own, but whole communities." Calvin's patience wasn't weakness. It was strength, survival even. So here's my question for you. If you found out your home was built on someone else's land, would you blame the guy who stood his ground or the people who never bothered to check? Leave your thoughts down below. Have you ever dealt with an HOA scandal, a bad developer, or a neighbor who thought they were above the law? Share your stories, weigh in on what real justice looks like, because in the end, the only thing more fragile than trust is the ground we build on. And hey, if you want more stories that get to the heart of power mistakes and the lessons we all have to learn the hard way, make sure you stick around. Because as Briar Glenn learned, sometimes the biggest explosions come from the quietest fuse.